Hello again, welcome back to Asgard, and welcome back to our Little Talks, part 2 of our Little Talks on Tales, kind of discussing a lot of agriculture and different things. Today we are going to be making a cake, and then we're going to talk about some in-game stuff as well as just a variety of other things. So anyways, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's go make a cake. I figured this would be a really great project for us to do today within Tales, to kind of showcase what agriculture is like within Tales. Now granted, I think at first looks, because I think most people are used to cake being a process of sticking wheat and eggs and milk and sugar into a crafting table, and boom, out pops a perfectly cooked cake. That's not the case within Tales. A little bit more of a process, because I don't like that system. And that being said, cooking isn't really as bad probably as this makes it seem, maybe. There is a lot of easy recipes. If you don't want to go really in depth with cooking, you don't have to. This is more of an optional thing. You won't be able to get true completion without doing agriculture, but Tales is kind of an experience where there's different facets. Like progression is one thing, and agriculture, while being tied into that, it's not completely tied into it. So you don't have to go, if you really just hate bee breeding so much, do expect to still have to breed bees, but not to the same degree as somebody who actually wants to breed bees. Because I didn't want to completely put people out in the cold that didn't want to do all facets of Tales. And I also tried to make it within Tales so that you and your friend setups may not be the exact same. A big part of Tales, for example, when it comes to Britannia, it's not so much about things taking millions of items, but do expect that you're going to be needing big mana setups. Now that can be anything except for Endoflames, because they don't exist within Tales. I hate seeing Endoflames. They don't even exist because it's a boring setup, dropping coal onto things. It's overused, so there is no Endoflames. I think I've mentioned that before. But do expect that probably your setups will vary substantially from other people's setups. So for example, if you were needing to automate cakes for, say, Cakey Morris, you would want to get this set up. It's actually not that bad to automate. In all honesty, it's not terrible. But for example, if we take a look at the cake, this requires the Masonry Oven. There is no throwing things into the crafting grids and them cooking. Instead, you do your crafting and your cooking at the Masonry Oven. Now, this isn't the case for every food, but this is the case for foods that require cooking and multiple different ingredients. And lots of stuff going on. You will need to make those at the Masonry Oven. Now, before we get into the cake, I'll show you the Masonry Oven. Originally, this thing was a lot more ornate, but I cut a lot of the ornate factors and made it kind of basic. That way you can decorate it, because I had it all decorated and it was required for the structure, but then I was like, you know what? This is like probably the first multi-block that you will ever make. Within Tales, it requires a lot of refractory blocks, but overall not too expensive. By the way, this cabinet's not required. That's just there for me to store some items in. But so the decoration is kind of left up to you how you want to set things up. I know originally this had like some charcoal piled up and some ash and things, and the structure itself was a whole lot bigger. But I decided I didn't want it to be too crazy or too expensive or too involved for you to craft your first multi-block. Not like ones that have a lot of kind of interior parts and stuff like over there. But the Masonry Oven, this is just a big, large outdoor oven. Most of it, like I said, is refractory blocks. You will have to make some nether smokers. That's what's causing the smoke particles back there. You also have to make a machine controller, an item input and output. The size is not specific, but I will say that it's not that bad to just go straight for ludicrous within Tales. I didn't want to punish people for having bigger item input and outputs, so you can just go straight for ludicrous out the gate. It's not a big deal. You're also going to need some item grates from Thermic Augmentation, and you're going to need some open fireplaces down here. They have to be lit, and these are from Dawn of Time Builder Edition. Originally, it was actually archaic lamps, but since those are a little bit lighter, because you have to get to Adam to get kind of into embers, the full swing of embers, so I decided to change that to open fireplaces, plus it gives me a use to use some of the building blocks within the mod pack and make them required for progression. But if you want to make a cake, basically you just have to dump all these different items into the item input. Now, that being said, first up, your mixing bowl and your bakeware will come back, so don't think that you have to remake those every time. Now into the actual ingredients, okay? There's a lot of things that I didn't like within base Minecraft, how they're crafted. You don't stick sugarcane on a table and it suddenly becomes sugar. I don't care how much you smash it with a hammer or whatever. It does not become sugar. So sugar is a little bit more of a process. You can still get it from bees. This is actually one of the big payoffs of going with bees, is that you can get sugar that way instead of doing the processing line. Though initially your sugar will all be made through this process. Bees actually pay off a lot within Tales for kind of circumventing some of the systems, making things a little bit easier on you. But once again, not required for most things. There is some requirements as far as bees go, like the gold honeycombs and dirty combs and different things, but you don't have to go super crazy with breeding if you don't want to. But normally, starting out at least, you're going to have to dry your sugar. This is a little bit more of like kind of an accurate process to how they would have done things. A lot of this stuff is more based off of kind of medieval Dark Age processing, not so much modern day processing. So you're going to crush either sugar canes or beetroot. Beetroot gives you 60 millibuckets of molten sugar. Sugarcane gives you 80 millibuckets of molten sugar. Now this is not intended to be molten sugar. I'm still messing with it. I had forgotten about it for a little while until I happened to come back to kind of double check some of my agriculture stuff when I was changing over to that maple syrup. And I actually have it set up, at least in the iGame class, for localization. I have it as raw sugary sap or raw sugary juice or something like that, but for some reason my name will not take effect. So I've got to try to figure out how to get Soot to quit calling it molten sugar and make it molten sugar, or make it my custom name. But right now it's molten sugar from Soot. This recipe also I probably should remove. It doesn't matter. It's kind of bad to do it this way, in all honesty. But yeah, it does exist, at least at the moment. So what we would do is, for example, let's get ourselves some sugarcane. And we can take this, and you can automate this like I showed before with the Rustichromia press. You can automate your crushing tubs. Probably something, if you're going to do a lot with agriculture, probably do want to do that, because you'll be doing a lot of crushing tubs within, within Tales. But we can crush this down, and we're going to get byproduct plant fibers, and then beetroots, of course, give beetroot seeds. And then that goes into the drying basin. It doesn't take a long time, and it's going to make you sugar. So, because traditionally, they would crush down, beets or sugarcane. Well, traditionally, I think it was just sugarcane, right? But they would crush that down, and then they would basically take the juice, and they would let that kind of dry in the sun and crystallize into sugar, what was then sugar. It would be like really coarse sugar for us nowadays, probably, but a lot different than what we use now. But so I did change that up. That's sugar. Very, very simple to make. Butter is a little bit more of a process, requiring the pestle and mortar, because I did not have a butter churn. But we can put this in there. We can. I'm not going to be able to left click in there. Let me set this. And I can basically churn this down. And of course you can automate this with a live crystal. Do highly suggest it. But we're going to get some heavy cream from that. And then we can take that heavy cream then and churn it just a bit more, and we're going to get butter. I know the traditional recipe for Pam's called for salt. We're not going with salt because this is like unsalted butter. Butter doesn't require salt, so we're basically just doing it purely out of just the fat from milk, making that butter. So once again, very automatable, whether that be through live crystals, or I think the Thumbcraft plate could do it too, but I haven't actually tried it, but I think that would probably work as well. But if nothing else, there is live crystals. Now, wheat flour, you can get this through the kiln with seeds. So take some seeds. I got to write that down. I was planning on adding a recipe to the kiln for Mustachromia to do it better, to where you could get a lot more output, and I just haven't added that. See, there's a lot of things like that I'm trying to get added in, just a lot of little odd and end stuff that I'm trying to get cleaned up. Fresh milk, this is basically just a stackable milk. So you can make 2 for the price of 1 bucket. That's going to be basically 2 servings of a dish. Eggs, which are straightforward, get some chickens. Wood ash, we're going to go ahead and talk about this one first. Of course, eventually, once you get into Bewitchment, get the Witch's Oven, you're going to get a lot of wood ash. You're going to have tons of this stuff. But initially, you're going to be using the kiln to do it. Oh, I set this wrong. I didn't mean to set the failure rate to 90%. I got to change that. I did not even realize it. See, this is the kind of stuff I have to fix. Now, traditionally, the wood ash, it would need to be from hardwood trees. Any kind of sapling in this case works. So I just made it easy, but traditionally it would be hardwood. And basically, wood ash and yogurt, they take the place of your baking powder. Traditionally, this would be how they did it. I've actually cooked it this way. You could also, in real life wise, you can trade out the yogurt for anything like vinegar or lemon juice, but you still have to have the reaction to get the cake to rise, right? Assuming you don't have baking powder. So for this, you're going to be using wood ash and yogurt to make your cake rise, because there's a whole lot more, of course, that goes into making a cake than just throwing some sugar and eggs and stuff together. So that's the purpose. If you're wondering why there's yogurt and wood ash, that's the purpose of it, because this is like old school, or if you're into like prepping or kind of doing things like in a really rustic manner, this would be ways that you could get your cake to rise. A little bit tricky if you're doing it in real life, a little bit tricky to get your ratios just right. But like I said, I have baked this way. It does turn out a little bit differently, probably because my ratios weren't right. But I will say, when it's cooked, the wood ash actually doesn't taste bad. You don't really taste it, to be honest. But anyways, yogurt, onto yogurt. Pam's Harvest Craft is default recipe is milk and a pot. And I don't care how much milk you throw into a pot, it doesn't just make yogurt. So instead, you are going to be doing it through the soaking pot with milk. It takes a little bit of time. So if you're going to be using yogurt, I do suggest running a few of these. 500 millibuckets of milk. It's going to get you 2 plain yogurts. And you're going to need to add yeast to this. And bear in mind, if you're doing this in real life, never add yeast to your yogurt. But within Tales, yeast is a kind of a placeholder for kind of anything that requires some sort of bacteria, you know. And yeast is produced with growth medium and spores to get your yeast, and growth medium is done like so. So, for example, we're going to throw in sugar, bone meal, and some stock, and smack that, and we're going to get some growth medium. And then we can craft all that together. We can throw our milk into our soaking pots, and we can throw in our yeast. Toss that in there, and that's going to start making us some yogurt. Like I said, it does take a while. For a lot of this stuff, you'll kind of want to plan for, because fermentation, it does take some time. So this does take 3 minutes to ferment. So, but that's going to get you your yogurt. Now from there, like for example, if you wanted to make the various different types of yogurt, I kept it simple. You know, this is going to be cherries and yogurt. I did take away the OR dictionary for it, because I'm trying to give purposes to various different things. So you're going to be making very specific tastes of yogurt. Though generally this yogurt, probably not a good food to go with, but it's actually fairly cheap to produce, because the yeast and the growth medium, you do create so much of that stuff at a time that's actually really easy to mass produce this with the right setup. But as I mentioned before, you're kind of expected within Tales, you know, or ideally you'd want to have a big setup, you know, a lot of different soaking pots, because these are going to be fermenting. It takes a while, so make a big area. If you're going to be using a lot of yogurt, make a big area of soaking pots. Don't just make one. Making one of things and thinking that's good enough tends to be a bad idea. You're not going to be able to get big setups, because certain things are kind of time gated like this. So it's set up in a way. That's one thing I like about Pyrotech, because that's actually base Pyrotech to have things be time intensive, because Pyrotech's really set up in a way that you want to kind of scale out. Now there is, as I mentioned in the Pyrotech tutorial, there is ways to kind of speed up certain things like drying and stuff in the various different machines. So that's how you're going to make your yogurt, and then you'll be able to make your cake. So a number of little processes, a lot of your kind of your ingredients, you know, for example, yogurt, butter, sugar, a lot of that stuff has little kind of processing recipes that are involved to actually make the finished product. So, oh, and stock, forgot to show you stock. So, all right, growth, medium, stock. You can make that in the masonry oven with either a pot, water, bone shards, and meat, or you can make it with a stew pot, fresh water, bone shards, and meat, raw meat, and various different outputs. You can see you can get a lot more stock from a stew pot. So I had to include that. It's just a more fun way. This is, you know, that's something I never tried. Well, I'll try it here in a minute. I haven't checked to see. I don't think stew pot comes back on its own though. I don't believe. That's something I put in the recipe that it outputs it, but I never actually tried it. But the Pam stuff all just kind of stays in there, which I love that. So, for example, if we grab all this stuff and we toss it in, it's going to take some of that. You can see it didn't consume the bakeware in the mixing bowl, and it's going to bake our cake. So our cake does take a little while to bake, as you can see, but it requires no power or anything. It requires no input aside from just the ingredients. So basically a free way to cook your food. So kind of a payoff, a trade-off for having a little bit more of a process when it comes to making food. So I've kind of tried to revolutionize food making, make it a whole lot more interesting, and not just throwing things in a crafting grid. So I know some people will appreciate it, and some people are probably going to be like, no, this is terrible. I got to make food in difficult ways. So, but generally there's some easier foods to make. You know, just meat is going to be a great thing. Now, you'll never be able to make top tier foods, like the kind of the foods that really give you a lot of payoff. You're not going to be able to make those, but you could still do the progression without going super crazy into agriculture. You can get by, you know, you can get up to like a 4 shank food, and just kind of coast on that, I guess. Now, let's see. Also, I guess I could tease you guys slightly. A lot of people probably have seen a lot of this stuff on the Discord, but we'll just quickly scroll through the separate chapters for the quest log. This is pretty much finalized. The only chapter that I might add, that I've been considering adding, is just a starter chapter here that's just notes about the pack. So a little bit of kind of information about the pack, and so, you know, a lot of the stuff that I've talked about entails kind of the idea behind the pack, and different things. So I may add a little tab there that's just kind of like a little reading section with check marks with no rewards. I may add that, we'll see, before you actually start into the pack proper. So, but if we go through here, this is all progression all the way down to kind of Disciple of Divinity, which is kind of your in-game chapter there. Dimensional Traveler is just kind of an overview of all the dimensions. Tips for building is what you might expect. Adventuring aids, what you might expect. Managing your items, automation assistance. All these are kind of just helpful chapters to kind of help you along if you're stuck. If you don't know, like, how do I right-click an item without an item clicker? Well, there is item clickers, but if you're not as familiar with the magic mods, you know, there's actually a couple different item clickers available. So that's kind of what that tab is for. And these are just kind of helpful tabs. Progression, I did try to keep it from being bogged down with a bunch of side things. So pretty much everything that you see in here is all kind of progression. There is a few side things in the first chapter, like, you know, you can make item storage without it being a chest. You know, some things like that. Also showing you like lurker skin bag, and talking about Scabust, and talking about sap, and, you know, a starter weapon, and some things like that. But generally, progression is not going to be bogged down in the quest with a bunch of side stuff. It's not going to be like, here, make a bunch of baubles, and this is in a progression tab. No, there's separate tabs for that. So when you're going through these progression tabs, it is purely progression. So if you need additional help, you can go down to some of these other tabs you know, I've set it up that way. That was after the rewrite. You know, I mentioned a while back that I was completely rewriting the way that the Tales quests were set up, and that is the byproduct of that, is completely restructuring out all the quests. I will probably move things around just to make them look prettier, because right now they're just kind of like, this is how I set it up while I was putting it together. So I may make it look pretty. You know, before I had like some pictures and stuff in there, like connect the dots. There's also collection quests. So it's not a purse, it's collecting lots of backpacks. No real benefit to doing that, except for just a little bit more flair. You know, if you want to show up beyond just your armor and stuff, you can show off with your backpack. Basically, I've taken all of these, I've scattered them around the world in various different ways. Some of them are crafted, some of them are found from really obscure places. Some of them are rare drops. You know, there's a bunch of different ways to collect those. So there's collection quests there. There's collecting all the bees, all the butterflies, which, in case you want to do it, you know, I plan to do it, but there's not a whole lot of purpose in butterflies. Me and Xavier were talking about that one day. This is seeds. Collect all the seeds, all the trees. Actually, if you want to see, for example, with this tab, I do want to make a quick mention about this tab. Normally, as far as like the progression quests, it's not a craft one item, quest complete, craft one item, quest complete, craft one item, quest complete. I don't like that. It feels like quest spam to me, and just a bunch of like slugging through quests, because everything that you do completes a quest. Generally, things are going to take you a decent amount of time, or at least some effort, some time. It's a new stage of progression for all the progression quests. It's not like craft one item, craft one item, craft one item. Now put these 3 items together, and you know there's another quest. It's like 4 quests making one thing. However, with trees and bees and some of that stuff, I did make specific quests for all the different trees as far as tree breeding goes. So all of this is my periodic table of trees. Generally, when you're looking at this, whenever you freshly start in the pack, all this stuff is locked based on what it requires to get that, assuming that it doesn't require the core 6 trees. So if you're actually doing tree breeding, you'll only see the trees that you can currently make with the trees that you've already unlocked. So I did set that up in that way. So there is a quest for every tree, but it's just to help you out. I debated for a long time how I wanted to do that, and that's the way I ended up settling on it. Now there's also horticulturists for flowers, fishing for catching all the fish, mycophile for collecting mushrooms, magical agriculturalist, which is related to getting all the different types of V seeds, getting the seeds for embers to grow your metals, which I do highly suggest doing. It's a great way to get some actual metal automation that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise. And also mystical agriculture's in there, and of course getting 10-10-10 with the ones that are available. That is in there. So these are very completionist type tabs. So Master Chef is for doing all the foods because you know you want to. But there is payoffs because you do have Spice of Life Carrot Edition, and to get maximum hearts, it is required that you get all the foods. So fun stuff. Master Brewer is for potion making and alcohol brewing. So expect to be doing that. It's going to be soot. It's going to be bennies and various different alchemy systems. The alchemy systems are very gated. Between lands, I love you between lands, but your alchemy system is the very last one available because it's so OP. Because it's very, very powerful. My favorite alchemy system ever, but it is the very last one that you do unlock. And you don't just unlock it because you want to, you do actually have to work for it. As is most things within the pack. Like, you can rush progression, but if you want to kind of get a lot of those benefits, better armor, better brews, better foods, all that stuff, you're actually going to have to put some effort and kind of work your way through the different tiers, because you can't be a master weaponsmith without, making a couple crap weapons. So you do kind of have to work your way up through that. Abilities Everlasting, which is everlasting abilities. Kind of a late game thing, but there is that for collection. Lord of the Beasts is for taming animals. For taming all the different animals. You do have that. Power of Creation is for kind of getting the ability to create all the different, which relates to mob spawning, being able to create and summon those mobs. Benkai would be proud is for armor and weapon collecting. So if you want to collect all the armor and weapon, and that includes kind of the mythical artifacts and stuff hidden throughout the pack, that is in there. Baubles everywhere is for collecting all the baubles. There is a whole lot. Raising statues is not for bewitchment statues, but is for the magical statues mod, because all the different little items for magical statues, the majority of them don't have crafting recipes. You actually find them while exploring. There's a lot to collect throughout the pack. So gotta slay them all is big hunt quest. So I had a few people complain whenever I first showed off the hunt quest about them being high numbers. I don't really care. They're still high numbers. Because you're going to be killing a lot of mobs. This isn't a set in your base pack. You'll be out killing things. So if it says kill 200 zombies, this actually doesn't take that long, I'll be perfectly honest, but that's for slaying a whole lot of monsters. Big Game Hunter is for killing all the bosses. This one is one that you will probably get through most of while going through progression, but there is a number of side bosses and mini bosses, so they'll be included in there. So you won't get it all through progression. Hero of the People is related to kind of side quests and whatnot, as well as kind of big bulk input quests, as well as doing various different little kind of bartering, exchanging with the villagers that you unlock, or the traders that you unlock in the hub area. And then True Completion is for doing all the things. So if you want True Completion, like right here, this is progression. All the rest of this is side stuff. That it's not just thrown in there. I have put a lot of effort into this stuff, so there's a lot to do in that aspect as well. So I try to build tales around the idea that progression is only one facet of a pack, just like I tried to say with the dimensions, that structures are only one facet of a dimension. You need fauna, flora, things to mine, things to do that keep you in that dimension to make an actual dimension. Otherwise, it's just recolors. So I tried to kind of go based on that principle as well, with the kind of going for that true hero of Allura, that true completion. This means you've done it all. You're a master chef, you're a master beekeeper. So all this stuff has had a lot of effort put into it, aside from just progression. So progression is just a part of that, as I've shown off kind of today, showing off a little bit of the agriculture. Now, back in here, I've mentioned it a few times. You guys that have on the Discord have probably already seen this potentially, but in game with Entails, it's not a big resource dump. Though I will say building your multi-blocks is expensive. I will go ahead and say that. Not to the point that you need 100,000 of anything, but it is expensive. A lot of it stems from the fact that a lot of this stuff you're going to have to get from exploring. There's a number of different dimensions that are kind of your late game and in-game dimensions. That's why if you take a look, this is all kind of dimension by dimension, and then you get to choosing your destiny. And from there on, the dimensions don't have their own tabs. Instead, it's these different disciple tabs. Because once you reach choosing your destiny, which is kind of the start of the late game of the pack, you're going to kind of choose one of these. You get to do them all. You can choose them all and go for all of them at the same time if you want. However, it's going to be a little bit cumbersome to do that, because all the structures that you need to build are big, very resource intensive, and kind of something that you don't just do passive. You kind of focus on these certain things. So you have Disciple of Nature, Disciple of Blood, Disciple of Madness, Creation, Heavens, and Ethereal. And you'll be going into kind of what Omethal, the End, the Underworld, and the Empty. Those 4 dimensions initially, and then you can kind of go out into the Fading Lands for the true end game of the pack as far as progression goes. But as you choose your destinies, you'll be building these big multi-blocks. This is one example, one that I've shown off a few times. The 6 choice engines, they're not super huge. You can see this thing is not massive by any stretch of the imagination, really. The creative engine is substantially bigger, though, and takes a bit more effort to craft. But that being said, once you get this unlocked, once you can craft through it, it's not it's not like super material input to do this. Once again, this can be upgraded into the higher tier smelters. It has to be at least mithrilium, but you can't upgrade it for, I think it's faster speed within this one. The Eldritch Engine is upgrades, yeah, reduce speed. Or I guess I should change that to increase speed. It runs faster. So, but this is the structure. You can see there is a couple things you do have to kind of note when you're setting this up. Your Starfield glass, if you do the preview, Starfield glass will not show up. Crimson Cult banners will not show up. But I do have a quest for basically giving you one big material list. And you can always tap through this and kind of go through the building process. So as you can see, very, very big structure here. And this is your Eldritch Engine. The Nitor, by the way, is not required. That's just there to light it up. Once you build this, basically all the free space, you can just put whatever you want in here. But just this stuff is required, basically. Also in the modular kind of preview screen, it says, I think you need like, I think it says you need 12 Eldritch Obelisks. It's only 4. I mentioned that in the quest. But it counts all of 4 of these because these are 4 tall. It counts them all as an Eldritch Obelisk. You don't actually need 4. You don't actually need 12. So your crystal blocks, they can be any crystal block. So you can kind of decorate to some degree, kind of customize it. Personally, I like the Vidium ones, but they can be any kind of crystal block. So, but very, very expensive. And you have your inputs here. So your item input, your item output, your fluid output, and your Essentia input. For doing your crafting here, and making these initially, you kind of have to set up your altar and then break it down. This is the example of the Eldritch one, which will basically be, this one is primarily your Thaumcraft and add-ons and Abyssal crafting, kind of your high-end crafting for those mods, where you'll be doing that. And if you're curious about what the different choices are, botanical path is Botania, and a lot of your some of your agriculture type stuff relates into the botanical engine. The Sanguine engine, which kind of governs your blood magic and evil craft. You have the Eldritch, which is of course Thaumcraft and Abyssal craft. You have the Tech engine. I haven't really thought of a better name for that. Technomancy maybe. Right now it's just labeled the Tech engine. But that does your DNA processing and your Draconic, your high-end Draconic, and other power mods. Just kind of general, your tech mods all kind of go into the tech section there for the most part. And then you have the Aether engine, which does Astral and Aether works. You know, kind of the high-end Embers stuff. You do that through the Aether engine. And then you have the Ethereal engine, which is Bewitchment and Evilcraft, because both of those have a lot of like ghost type stuff related to kind of their late well, technically I think Bewitchment's more like mid game, but I've changed it to be more end game. So those kind of relate to the Ethereal engine, and you do spend a lot of time like in the underworld for that tree as well, hunting spirits. So but that's kind of just a short look at the end game within Tales. So just kind of a little sneak peek, and kind of the way that it works. So you're going to spend the majority of your time with 0 payoff working on these big, massive crafting engines, and then once you can harness the power of these big, like the Eldritch engine or whatever, then you can do your big crafts. Not super resource intensive, but you know, there is still a little bit of a cost there. And I know this episode is running probably extremely long, and it's probably going to be an hour-long episode. It might even be more, but you know what? I'm going to post it anyways. Might be a long episode, but you guys have been waiting for a while, and yeah, like I said, I've been showing some sneak peeks on the Discord. So if you're not on there, once again, I do highly suggest you get on there if you want to stay kind of up to date with the pack. Like I said, I don't really make a video over every little thing within the pack that I do, but and in some cases it's very long stretches without a video. That's just because, you know, I'm not ready to necessarily show anything, because usually we show a few things within the pack, and if I spam videos, it's going to be giving away, I think, too much. before the pack actually comes out. So, but that being said, I am still shooting for end of the year. We'll see. That's kind of my hope, but it's a lot of just kind of cleaning things up. But also I did get early access to some between lands, so that's helped out. So a big thank you to Triple-Headed Sheep. I do want to mention him on here. Say a big thank you for that, because that's helped me out a lot as far as kind of restructuring and making way for that. Because it actually came at a perfect time, because I had to do a lot of restructuring for the latest kind of big Roots update, which I had been anticipating that, because Noob had let me know a lot of what was coming in that ahead of time, and I had kind of been waiting on, holding out to some degree on that, but I had to do a lot of work to re-implement that, but it had a lot of quality of life stuff that I really needed, like for example Tree of Transformation. I can now see that in JEI, which that's huge. Or Ritual Transmutation, because I use that for quite a few things. Unfortunately, Salus Mundus not able to see that in JEI. There's a few things that you'll kind of have to remember, though they're not things that you're really going to use a whole lot either. So, but big thank you to everybody that's been patient during this process. It's been a long time coming. Like what, 3 years this pack has been in works. But to be fair, in my defense, first up, part of that was just mod planning, and then this pack has went through a few rewrites, because like I said, I'm not going to post this, or I'm not going to go public with this pack until I'm happy with it, and there's nothing really that I'm like, man, I need to change this. Now I will say, once it goes into testing phase, I will still be finishing up structures and stuff. I know that. I totally accept that. There's still miscellaneous structures that still need to be finished up, and a few progression structures. Those actually take a really long time to make the boss fights fun and unique. The only reason I haven't showed off any of those is because that would be heavy spoilers to show off much of that. But big dungeons, some of them very, very big, and big boss fights. So starting out, they're not super big. Let's see, I think the longest Between Lands one is maybe a 20-25 minute dungeon, maybe, but that's because you don't have the means to survive for long stretches of time at the start of the pack. So I don't want to make it too difficult for you guys. But yeah, so once again, big thank you to everyone that has kind of supported the project, been patient with the project. It's still in development. It hasn't ever not been in development. I mean, there has been certain times, depending on the pack that I'm working on, where it might be a couple weeks before I can get on here to do much, depending on how time intensive the packs are. But luckily, the packs that I've kind of taken on lately have been a lot more lax. I can get a lot more time on this to kind of crunch and try to get a lot of this stuff kind of cleaned up. As soon as I get everything cleaned up and a couple things kind of polished off and whatnot, then I'll be ready to put this into testing. Like I said before, I really don't want to put it into testing until the stuff that I know needs to be fixed is fixed. Because we had an early testing phase early on, and it was hard to get work done because I was like, oh, I need to fix this and this and this, and I was getting a lot of input, which is great, but there's a lot of stuff like I know that needs to be sorted out, and so I want to make sure that all that's clean, because at the end of the day, the goal is to, once this pack comes out into testing phase, and especially once it comes out to public phase, there's not going to be huge changes to progression. There's not going to be huge changes to mods. It's going to be the mods and the progression and everything there, just bug fixing is my goal. I want everything to be there and not be radical changes, because I hate that. I think a lot of packs come out and then they're kind of going through bug fixing and changes to progression stuff for a year or two after Tales. Once it comes out, that should all be done, and so this will be actually a finished product once it comes out. That's the goal. And I also want to spend a little bit more time doing some performance fixes, just here and there. I will say I've had some questions, just really quick. I know this video is super long, but as far as the pack runs, because I get that question a bit, the biggest times that you're going to see performance hits, like at least for me, I can fly around here on creative all day, pretty much any dimension. Yeah, I guess any dimension. And have 20 FPS. That's not a problem. Or 20 TPS. FPS is fine. The two big things that hit progression is load time. Starting up the pack, it does take a while. Not really much different than, say, Enigmatica or, whatever. Basically, any pack that has a lot of scripts running is going to take a little bit on load time. So, there is a massive number of recipes. That's one thing I do want to take some time to clean up. Because, as I've mentioned, this was my first pack I've ever made. It's been a learning process. That's part of what's taken a while. So my early scripts and even some of my more newer scripts are kind of a mess. So I do want to clean up some of those. Some of my scripts look real nice. Most of them are just kind of like... And the other part where you'll notice some performance hits is if it is generating structures. A lot of the structures are big within Tales. Some of them are massive structures within Tales. Like the Labyrinth or the Omathal Citadel. Some of those are big. So, that being said, load times when those pop in can take a little while. So, just a heads up. But it is what it is. You can't have your cake and eat it too. We got big structures. You will see a little bit of a lag spike when you first load in some of those structures. The ones in the between lands usually not too bad. And then most of the little minor structures not too bad. But some of those bigger structures, some of them do take a second to load. So, but as far as that goes, like, I pretty much never crash on this pack. It runs great. If I'm on here, let's see. You know how there's generally, if you're on a pack for very long, you need to restart the pack. My threshold for having to restart the pack is about 14 or 15 hours. If I'm on here longer than that, I do need to restart usually, because it kind of starts, I guess, just the trash dump. It kind of gets boggy and I have to restart after about 15 or 16 hours. But that's actually not too bad. That's not too bad. It's a pretty good threshold, I think. So overall, it's going to take a little bit to load, but just go fix a drink or something. And then load time, whenever it's genning a structure, you're going to take a hit, but that is what it is. But on the plus side, you don't have to worry. There's not very much difference between starting game and end game if you're not just chunk loading everything. Like I said, it's not a pack where you need to chunk load a lot of stuff, and it's not a pack where you need things running super fast. So different take. So different. It's a lot easier on performance as far as your setups and stuff go, or it should be if you're doing it right. So, anyways, with that, we are going to wrap up this episode here. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys saw some stuff that maybe you were interested in within the pack and stuff to look forward to. And yeah, I do want to do a video probably just shortly before the pack goes into test phase, because I'll be doing a series once it hits test phase. I do want to do a episode on the intro to the pack, because as I've mentioned, it doesn't just drop you into the world. It's a little bit more process, a little bit more story and stuff going on, a little bit more like, oh, that's interesting, maybe, instead of just, whoop, I'm in the Minecraft world. So, but yeah, so anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Sorry if it's long, but, I'm not making you watch it, so you can stop whenever you feel froggy, I guess. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, as always, be sure and hit that like button and go ahead and subscribe if you're not already to stay updated with when new videos come out. And I hope to see you guys next time. So until then, as always, do take care, stay safe. I'll see you guys then. And I actually just had an idea. I might change, for making the yogurt, change it from taking yeast, just taking another kind of spore. I know for the Adam, the Alchemist's Fingers or whatever spore, that's used for making your lager yeast, and so maybe just do a different spore. Probably be better than having yeast. I think it would make more sense anyways, because yeast would just ruin it anyways. But it was just it was kind of like a general placeholder for bacteria, but I think that would be better, just some other kind of spore.